get a chance to be able to see it if you want to.
Do we say our names when we do this?
You do not need to know.
Okay.
There once were two evil stepsisters, an evil stepmother, and a distraught prince. Now, the prince was looking for his love, and he brought a golden slipper to find her. So the stepmother knew this and told the first stepsister to cut off her toe. She did so the shoe would fit. She went to the prince, but he saw the blood in her shoe and sent her away, knowing she was a fake. So then the stepmother told the other stepsister to cut off a part of her heel so the shoe would fit. She did, and she went to the prince, but the prince saw the blood on her shoe again and knew she was a faker. This story is taken from the Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, published in 1993 by New York Barnes & Noble Books. It is the classic tale known as Cinderella.
We have all heard the story Cinderella and many other stories, whether that's a bedtime story, a favorite movie, or even a favorite book.
The Grimm brothers wrote many folk tales that originated from Gothic literature. These tales are now known around the world through their many different adaptations.
First, we'll discuss the Gothic style of literature. Second, the lives of the Grimm brothers. Third, the tales they wrote. And finally, the modern adaptations of the tales.
Before we talk about the Grimm brothers, it is important to know about the Gothic literature. The Grimm brothers used the elements of Gothic style of literature. According to the online article, Gothic Literature, which was written by Mel, copyright in 2007, Gothic style of literature was originated in the Romantic movement of the 19th century. The term as which we classify as Gothic is just a subgenre of the Romantic movement. The Romantic movement was basically just the movement of the arts, and it also revolted against the political norms of the Age of Enlightenment. The movement validated strong emotion and emphasized the emotions of horror, terror, and awe. The aforementioned source goes on to say that the Romantic movement works are now widely shown in novels and short stories. There are also poetic, artistic, and dramatic forms of these works from the Romantic movement, and also now in present day cinematic forms, which we'll talk about later in this presentation.
Now, where did all this Gothic sort of feeling come from? Well, surprisingly enough, it came from the Catholic Church. There was a time where they built very Gothic churches that were straight and up, giving the feeling that we all want to go to the heavens. This is why in Gothic literature that there are such accounts of sublime and serene. Also, this accounts for the amount of Catholicism that is inside Gothic literature. However, it is also negative because by the time Gothic literature arose, the church was not so popular.
Gothic literature has many different elements that Gothic writers used, like the Grimm brothers did. One thing that they did use was have women be in danger. This would put them through events that would leave them terrified, screaming, fainting, or even crying. Also, they would have the main character be an oppressed heroine and add that onto the women. That would make it the center point of their stories. Also, women were often left alone, abandoned, and have no protectors. And this is according to Elements of the Gothic Novel, copyrighted of 2011. And the Grimm brothers exemplify this in Snow White. Snow White was abandoned. She was left alone, and she doesn't have any protectors. And that's according to Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales.
Another element the Grimm brothers used was the use of supernatural, inexplicable events. This is where the events are amazing or inexplainable, such as walking giants, ghosts, or even inanimate objects coming to life. And this tale, most of them have natural explanation, but in some they are supernatural. And this is shown in the Brothers Grimm's tale, Beauty and the Beast, when inanimate objects come to life. And this is according to Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales.
And yet another tool of Gothic writing found in the article Elements of the Gothic Novel is having women be threatened by tyrannical, powerful, and impulsive males. This is when one or more of the male characters has the power, such as a king, a father, or a guardian. They demand that one of the female characters do something intolerable, like marry someone they don't love or commit a crime. An example of this style can be found in the Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, taken from the story Rapunzel, where Rapunzel's father forces her to stay locked away in a tower.
Another element of Gothic literature is having an atmosphere of mystery and suspense. According to the online article, Elements of the Gothic Novel, the work is usually encompassed with a threatening feeling or a fear of the unknown. The plot is also built around a mystery, this mystery either being a disappearance or an inexplicable event. In modern filmmaking today, you can see these inexplicable events being usually murders. According to Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, this element is shown in the Brothers Grimm's tale, Little Red Riding Hood, where Little Red Riding Hood is constantly in fear and feels threatened by the wolf.
Now, all these elements helped give the Grimm brothers such a high understanding of sad and depressing facts. Aside from being very phenomenal writers, they also lived rather normal lives. Jacob Carl Grimm was born on January 4th, 1785. Throughout his life, he enjoyed research and the theory of language and grammar. This was taken from the Encyclopedia of World Biographies at notablebiographies.com, updated the 30th of April, 2012. He also came up with the Grimm Law, the shift between consonants between words in Indo-European languages, such as in America we say apple, where in Germany they say Apfel. This was taken from the Brothers Grimm biography on infoplease.com, last updated the 30th of April 2012. Afterward, at some point in his life, Jacob decided to go into the legal fashion, which did not work out so well for him, also taken from notablebiographies.com.
And also according to notablebiographies.com, Wilhelm Carl Jacob was born February 24th, 1786. And him, like his brother and father, was also trying to become a lawyer. He is much physically weaker than Jacob, and he was more interested in the music and the literature. Although the Grimm stories do have twisted middles and gruesome scenes, they tend to have happy endings and a pleasant side, and that was what Wilhelm was in charge of.
Imagine living with your siblings for the rest of your life, pursuing the same career, doing the same thing, and living with them even after they are married. Well, the two brothers continued to live side by side in their later years. Their legal studies, however, did not last long. The professor Friedrich von Sabine introduced them to their interest in past national culture. The Romantic movement and their professor had a huge role in their interest in folktales. According to notablebiographies.com, the Romantic movement had a huge role on their interest in folktales, and the Romantic poets helped them collect folktales because they already had folktales that they collected, according to enos.com. The two brothers in Kassel, Germany became librarians. Jacob became the head librarian, while Wilhelm, his brother, became his assistant. Later on, they became professors at the University of Greenwich, but they later got kicked out for protesting against the king. After their troubles had subsided, they decided to write a dictionary with all the German words and the origin of the words. They only made it to the letter B before they passed away, and scholars continued to finish the dictionary, and there are now 16 large volumes, according to enos.com, last updated in 2012.
Although the Grimm brothers' lives were not the most interesting and eventful, their stories completely portrayed otherwise. He took a pair of shears and began to slit up the wolf's body. Out came the grandmother. They then filled up the stomach with rocks and sewed it shut, so when the wolf would awake, he'd fall over dead. Little Red Riding Hood.
We will take the children early in the morning into the woods, give each of them a piece of bread, go to our own work, and leave them alone. They'll never find their way home again, and we will be rid of them. Hansel and Gretel.
The king's son climbed up the hair to the top of the tower. To his fright, the witch was there. But he swept away and jumped down. He got away, but the thorns he landed in poked out his eyes. Rapunzel.
I will give you all the riches in the world, if you promise me your daughter. But you must chop off her hands, for they are too pure. If you don't, you will take her place. So the daughter placed her hands upon the table, while her father chopped them off. The maiden without hands.
No, the devil told you my name was Rumpelstiltskin. In anger, he seized his right foot and stamped so hard it went into the ground above his right knee. In fury, he seized his left foot and split himself in two, Rumpelstiltskin.
All of these quotes which we have just told you, you may be familiar with some of the stories, and these were taken from Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. The Brothers Grimm tales have lasting themes that are well known around the world. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm named their story collection Children and Household Tales, and this was first published in 1812 in Germany, according to the Grimm Brothers homepage, copyrighted July 2010 by D.L. Ashelman, a University of Pittsburgh professor. The first volume contained 86 stories, and then many more editions were published, but stories had to be edited, subtracted, and added to make them just how the brothers visioned them to be. According to the aforementioned source, the final edition, which was the 7th, contained 211 tales. An article called The Guardians of the Fairy Tale, The Brothers Grimm, copyright 2000 by NationalGeographic.com, makes the point that the Grimm brothers did not originally set out to collect stories that were aimed at children. The source goes on to say that once they realized that children were going to be a main audience of their stories, they sought to refine and soften their tales. And to do this, they had to remove a lot of the sexual content. For example, in an early version of Rapunzel, she naively mentions her tight dress due to her pregnant belly, which was a cause of the king raping her. And I think we can all agree that if content that was so graphic like this was left in versions of Rapunzel, our parents would not be reading to this as bedtime stories. And then also to make the characters more suitable for children, the Grimm brothers changed wicked mothers into stepmothers and witches, and they changed incestuous fathers into devils. However, violence did increase, which is seen through brutal deaths, eating of children, and torture, specifically towards villains.
The Grimm brothers' tales have many questionable themes. According to the Grimm brothers homepage by Professor Ashelman, the tales are often criticized because, as mentioned before, the collection was stated as children's and household tales. However, this is extremely ironic because in no way were they suitable for children, because the tales had a mature storyline and subject matter. Some of the common themes of the Grimm brothers' works include fear, discipline, and caution. National Geographic goes on to say that these themes were supposed to teach children in the stories Little Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel valuable lessons, and they are known as warning tales. Some of the cruelty and violence in these tales can be reflected back to the medieval culture from when these stories originated from. Overall, even though they do have questionable themes, the Grimm Brothers collection represents a collection that compares to nothing else you have seen today in your culture.
Now, apart from all the what's what of how bad these tales were, they are world-renowned folk tales around everywhere. Stories such as Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, and others such as Snow White and Rumpelstiltskin are right up there. There are many characters that are not overused, but are used as well in other stories, such as witches, giants, dwarves, etc. The Grimm stories have been translated into over 160 languages, ranging from the Inupiat in the Arctic to Swahili in Africa. I mean, in US alone, there's over 120 editions. Also, in Germany, the Grimm folk tales are one of the most high-selling books imaginable, next, of course, to the Lutheran Bible.
The brothers' influence lasted well beyond their years. Many modern adaptations have been taken from these tales, and for example, Disney. Disney took a lot of their movies from the Grimm brothers, and although the Grimm brothers got their sources from different places. One example, The Little Mermaid. According to the top 10 gruesome fairy tale origins copyrighted in 2009, it says that the Grimm brothers first came up with their Little Mermaid in 1836, and Disney made it the Big Whopper in 1989. And in that version, we all know that Ariel marries Prince Eric. However, in the Grimm version, she watches Eric marry another princess whom she despises. Then she is offered a knife to kill him. However, she does not go through with the order and instead jumps into the ocean and dies by turning into froth.
Another folktale that was taken from the Grimm brothers was Snow White. It was written in the 19th century, and there are 3 different times that Snow White is killed by the queen. Disney took the Grimm brothers version but they took the good parts and left the gruesome parts out. And the first time that the queen tries to kill Snow White, she asks a huntsman to kill her and bring back her lungs and liver. The queen is planning on eating those for dinner. Unlike the Disney version where she wakes up from the kiss of a prince, she wakes up after the dwarf carrying her coffin onto the prince's horse drops it and the apple dislodges from her throat. And this is according to Sir Laloon, fairytales.com, last updated in 2011.
And yet another Disney story that we're all familiar with is Sleeping Beauty. According to an article found online called The Story Behind Sleeping Beauty, copyrighted in 2009 by John Davis, a historian, Disney took their story from the Grimm brothers. However, the Grimm brothers' version was a lot different. In the Grimm's version, Sleeping Beauty pricks her finger on the spinning wheel of flax, similar to how it happens in the Disney movie that we all know, and she falls asleep. However, the version in Disney does not include that Sleeping Beauty gets raped by the prince, keep in mind while she's asleep, and then later gives birth to 2 children while she is still asleep. And how she wakes up versus getting kissed by a prince in the version we know is that one of the children that she just gave birth to sucks the flax out of her finger, causing her to wake up. The 2 versions that we know then are a lot different because Disney took out a lot of these details.
Another well-known Disney tale is Rapunzel. The Grimm brothers took Rapunzel and revised it many, many times. This is according to the Origin and History of the Rapunzel article found on Children's Books Online, copyrighted in 2009, written by retired librarian and teacher Don K. Davis. The first version of the Grimm's Rapunzel was actually called Saint Barbara, where Saint Barbara's father locked her away in a tower far away from the rest of the world because he was afraid that she was going to marry an unworthy man. However, while Barbara was in this tower, she began reading scripture and became a Christian. When her father found out about this, he was outraged, and he sent her to the Roman proconsul, where the judge ordered for her head to be cut off. Her own father followed out these orders. However, before this could happen, he was then struck by lightning and consumed by fire. The Grimm brothers took this version and modified it many times because they wanted to be more suitable for children. And finally, in 1857, after the first version was written in 1812, the Grimm brothers version was completely wiped out of all of the sexual references, and Disney took the last version completely and made it into what we now know as Rapunzel. And now there are even more modern adaptations of Rapunzel, such as the movie Tangled.
Yet another modern adaptation is the TV series. According to NBC.com, which was last updated in 2012, it says that the TV series known as Grimm was taken from the Grimm brothers. According to IMDb.com, last updated in 2012, it says that the main character, who's Nick Burkhart, is a criminal detective, and he can see average day people turn into hideous monsters. He has the ability to see supernatural creatures. He also finds out he is the descendant of an elite line criminal profilers known as Grimms. He is also charged with keeping the balance between humanity and the mythological creatures of the world. He also teams up with the Big Bad Wolf, and the Big Bad Wolf leads him to criminals he thought were only found in fairy tales.
Next, we'll be showing you a visual aid with a video that we've taken from YouTube. Give me a moment here. Okay.
This preview showcases the TV show's perverted version of Little Red Riding Hood. This clip shows Nick's ability to see creatures lurking among us. Next, we go right back to Little Red Riding Hood. This unassuming mailman turns out to be, you guessed it, the Big Bad Wolf.
The Grimm brothers' tales were also turned into a movie. According to IMDb.com, The Brothers Grimm was a well-known movie produced in 2005. It was directed by Terry Gilliam and casted Matt Damon and Heath Ledger. Terry Gilliam included the tale of Brothers Grimm, but he made up his own origin of the folk tales. He, however, includes a little girl in red skipping through the forest and an old hag brandishing a shiny apple.
First, we discussed the Gothic style of literature. Second, the lives of the Grimm brothers. Third, the tales they wrote. And finally, the many modern adaptations that were derived from the tales.
The Grimm brothers' folk tales are now well known around the world through their many modern adaptations.
And if you're wondering where Cinderella was in the beginning of our presentation, don't worry. She lived happily ever after with the prince while her stepsisters got their eyes poked out by pigeons.